Welcome to the Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm Blake Fisher, and I'm a political junkie, so that you don't necessarily have to be. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time with me today. And my guest today is Ross Yerger, aka Yergz. I do a show with Yergz on Friday. I am the conservative voice. I play the conservative role on his show where he hosts. And then we have a Democrat, Matt Diemer, who is running for Congress in Ohio. And we talk about just the stuff that went on that week, and we argue about it, and it's fun. It's a great show. It's been a lot of fun doing it. I do it live on the radio, which is a different thing for me for sure. And so anyway, Ross is here today, and I thought we basically got into a little discussion last week about polling and if we think it's accurate, and I am leaning towards it looks like Trump's going to win in November. He thinks Biden's going to win in November, and specifically Democrats are going to take more of the House and Senate potentially. So I just wanted to talk further about that because we really only got to touch on it for a couple of minutes last week. And I thought this stuff is interesting enough. And, you know, it is, to be fair, wonky. And this is a little bit in the weeds of polling. And I don't love to go into the depths of this all the time because I think we can pay way too much attention to polls this early, especially we're a little less than 6 months out from the election. Election is November, and we're in the middle of May currently. So, you know, but I think it's at least worth looking at, seeing how it's shaping the campaigns, seeing how it's shaping these debates that they've agreed to do starting in June and one in September. At least they've agreed to two so far. We'll see if that sticks. So basically today we're going to talk about the polling. Then we're going to talk about is it accurate? We're going to talk about who we think is going to win in November, how we think it's going to shake out. We'll try to hold ourselves accountable to that at some point in the future after the election. And then we'll get to talking about those debates that I mentioned and if we think they're going to help or hurt anyone and why they agreed to them in the first place. So thanks for coming on, Yergz.
Yeah, and I almost said, welcome, Blake. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This ain't my show.
That's okay. We're switching roles a little bit. You know, you get to run that show. I'm going to run this one. Not that it matters.
You're not a guest on that one. You're a co-host.
That's good. That counts.
I really enjoy having both of you guys on. It's a good show.
It is fun, and it's currently called Up the Middle. We're trying to, if you've got any name suggestions, we're trying to find something that conveys that, you know, it's a reasonable discussion between the different sides, and it's been fun. You brought up on the show last week that you don't believe the polling as much. This is kind of the current state of things right now in the battleground states. So the battleground states for this election, it's like every year it's like here's your new battleground states, and they're the focus for I mean, now what seems like a 4-year period of time since we've jumped from having I feel like the presidential election cycle starts before the previous president that got elected is even sworn in sometimes. But so we've got Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada. These states plus Nebraska and Maine have a weird thing where they don't give, it's not winner take all in those two states. Maine actually splits off. It's like 2 of the delegates are the winner of the state, and then the other 2 go to certain districts, and Nebraska's similar, but they're trying to maybe change that. And those could come into play this year because it looks like it's going to be that close of an election. So Trump is leading in all of these right now. So by very slim margins, like in Wisconsin and Michigan, for example, those are basically well within the margin of error and would be, I would say, ties right now. I think that'd be fair. And then, but some of the other states like North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia look a little bit more like Trump's 4 or 5, 6 points ahead, which gets a little bit more. And in some polls, I mean, I don't necessarily believe them, and this gets into where is polling accurate, is it not? I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics averages, which tend to have been, I looked back at 2020 and 2016, closer when they look at the averages and kind of dump some of the polls that have certain people too high and too low. They basically kind of dump some of the high and the low. And so I tend to like these kind of aggregates. 538 is another one that does a lot of this kind of stuff. And instead of just looking at one specific poll, I think it's interesting because the difference between 2016, 2020, and 2024 so far, in my opinion, is that in 2016 and 2020, everyone complained about the election polls being wrong, but they were wrong against Donald Trump, if that makes sense. They were underestimating his support, both in 2016 and 2020. And to kind of really nail down, a lot of times you'll see in these polls, you'll see people talk about national polls. Well, I don't think national polls matter at all. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because that's not how we vote, right? It's not.
I don't think any of the polls matter at all.
Okay, yeah.
And you just made a good point also. It's not how we vote.
Yeah.
If we can vote in a consistent type of fashion on one day for the federal election, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, which is why my birthday will never be election day, which is November 1st, because we didn't have the first Monday yet.
Right. That's fine. You don't want to sully your birthday with an election day, I don't think. I mean,
yeah. Why can't we do primaries and or caucuses on the same day also?
Yeah, I mean, I do. So polling is one of those weird things where I think that I am more anti it when it comes to the primaries for sure, because I think you're right. I think that the polls wag the dog a little bit too much in the primaries. You see people stay home because they go, well, my guy has no chance of winning.
It's more about emotion.
Yeah, and really those polls are so, first of all, general election polls are a much bigger field of people that they're talking to, because naturally more people vote in November than they do in primaries. That's just the simple truth. If you look back at 2016, which is the last time we had a open primary in both parties. So you had Hillary Clinton and duking it out with Bernie Sanders, and you had Donald Trump duking it out with all 17 people or whatever were originally in that field. And so you had true like open primaries. When I say open primaries, I mean like both sides were electing someone new, because we had a two-term president that was leaving office. And
both primaries in some states and open in others.
Yeah.
Not that open primary.
So even in those, you had 14% of registered Republicans and roughly the same number of registered Democrats that actually voted in those primaries. So a total of like 28% of the electorate voted, whereas more like 50 to 60% of the electorate votes in the general election. So there's a whole group of people that just don't vote in primaries. And so you've got a smaller sample size, which means they're less accurate, I think, in the primaries.
The main election ain't that big.
Yeah,
and that's why I think Donald Trump is kind of a blessing, in that maybe it can scare a little bit of people about what's coming.
Well, and so that's interesting that you bring that up, because now another interesting thing that's happened. So I agree. I agree with you in the sense that I don't think polls are always totally accurate, especially when they're trying. If there's a lot of nuance in the polling, like for example, it can be like, how do they ask the questions? A lot of it's just name recognition, especially in the primaries, which is why people like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are going to do better in the polling in those primaries, because they were already recognizable names, as opposed to people might have heard of Jeb Bush, but like they knew maybe he was a brother or something like that. But I mean, like, he wasn't a national politics, celebrity, which is essentially what Donald Trump was. So name recognition can skew a lot of stuff. But one interesting poll that I was going to bring up later, but I think is worth bringing up now, is there was a I think it was a New York Times poll that had basically there's a whole bunch of people that are never Trump. There's a bunch of people that, like me, really don't like Trump, didn't like him 2016, didn't like him 2020, certainly don't like him anymore now than I did then. But there's more people that are saying they're never Biden now than there are never Trump in those swing states, which I think is really interesting. And I guess I would guess that's just pushback on all the policies and stuff. I don't think that there's a specific, like, I don't think it's as much personality as it is with Trump, I would guess. I don't think most people have the objection to it, other than just the kind of fecklessness and stuff.
I think the biggest issue there isn't even as much the policy, because a lot of the policies he's pushing ain't going to happen.
Right, but some of them already had real world consequences, right?
Gun control.
Yeah, he's not going to do
everybody. We gotta, and the far left, as you and I and Matt talked about before, that he's pandering to, doing a better job pandering to than the middle right,
Yeah.
that he could win over, they're the ones that want to eliminate all guns.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't like extremism in either direction from either side, because they only view certain things from their perspective.
And there's no
Well, you don't need,
compromise. They will not compromise generally. The
right.
far left and far right.
And their logic is, well, you don't need a gun.
Right.
That might be true, but that's not for you to say.
Right.
And the reason why that's really never going to happen, no matter how much he panders to that left, is I did this. The namesake of our show now, Up the Middle, is also my pre-recorded podcast. And one of the stats I did about, people in the middle and why there really aren't party lines anymore. 37% of Republicans are pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the one coming into the gun side. 20% of Democrats carry a gun.
Yeah.
Not pro-Second Amendment.
Just actually carry
a gun.
Yeah.
So now what percentage do you think is just simply pro-Second Amendment? It's at least 20%.
Right. You think, yeah, it's got to be higher than that. I mean, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because both of them are doing this. Although oddly enough, and we'll get to this when we talk about who we think is actually going to win in November, I think that both, for the most part, Trump and Biden have done a bad job or a good job, depending on which way you think it's going. But I mean, obviously, they're being told to pander to their base exclusively, and they think that they can win the election by base turnout. I mean, that's clearly the strategy for November for both Trump and Biden is we've got to bring out the base and make as many people scared of the other guy as possible. It's clearly what the strategy is. Biden, I think, is doing that to his detriment. Trump has actually, I would say, moderated in some ways. If you look at what he's doing on things like abortion, and he's trying to sort of, he's doing more to be, I don't know, grab some of those independents maybe than Biden is right now. Because I can't see anything that Biden's doing that's winning him independents right now who don't feel good about inflation, don't feel good about the economy, don't feel good about Ukraine, don't feel good about Israel. I don't feel like he's doing as much, whereas Trump is doing a little bit. Now, I don't know that it's enough, but Trump's also leading in all the polls, so he doesn't probably feel like he has to as much, but it's weird that he is. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I've got a bunch of different theories for everything that you just said now. One, we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't think Trump wants to be president. I really seriously believe that.
I used to believe that, but I'm not sure anymore.
You said yourself that he's got a better team this time than he did in 2016.
Yeah, as far as a campaign, it's actually a legitimate campaign.
Saying stupid shit he's saying.
Yeah, well, because he can't help himself. I don't think it's that he doesn't want to be president. I think if he didn't want to be president, he wouldn't have ran again.
He's got a better team because if you remember, back in 2016, there was that little period where they took his phone away from him.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yes.
And his tweets actually were intelligent.
Yeah.
Because the staffer was doing it.
Yeah, but he's not giving that up again. I mean, I think that I think there was a point where I don't think there's ever been a point where Trump really listened and followed the directions of his campaign staff or his administration staff.
I tell you that never happened.
Yeah.
One of our sponsors is a podcast called The Whistleblowers.
Mm-hmm.
It's by a man named Miles Taylor. If you remember back in 2017, 2018, 2017, sometime early in the Trump administration, there was a New York Times op-ed that was like the second time in their history they ran it under the name Anonymous.
Right. Yeah.
New York Times does not do that. And they did it this time to keep this person's identity concealed. It was Miles Taylor.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where even reporters at the New York Times were trying to dig about who Anonymous at the New York Times was.
Right.
They just weren't in the editorial department. His podcast is about everybody, himself included, who blew the whistle on the Trump administration. Every single story about those, some of them are about people a little further out, but from the inner circle, but every single story about the ones in the inner circle is about how they tried to corral him.
Mm-hmm.
And not because he's an outsider, he's not a real politician, just because they wanted to, okay, he won. They never wanted that in the first place. No Republican at all. Paul Ryan, Boehner and retirement. Nobody wanted Donald Trump at all.
Right. From the field of Republicans could be there. Now, once he was the nominee, I think they kind of like went, well, we gotta, but.
Exactly. They were like, okay, well, here he is. All right. And they tried to, and for that, I don't want to say corral him. I'll say they tried to guide him.
Right. I think that's exactly what they,
what they should be doing. When we had in 2008 and we had in 2016, no vice president running for president, the first times in a while.
Yeah.
And you say, well, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, the junior senator who was still junior.
Right.
Where Hillary Clinton was a junior senator from New York.
He was a freshman. He was a freshman senator, wasn't he? Yeah, he was a freshman.
So.
Yeah, he was only 4 years into it when he got elected for president. Yeah.
Right. Well, what experience do you have? None.
Right.
Nobody's going to. That's the point. In most cases, except for, like now, legitimately, you're not going to have prior experience.
Unless you're a governor.
In the United States.
But if you're a governor, I think you have better executive experience than if you are a senator or a congressman. But still, we've not had that in a while.
To be fair to Trump, he had plenty of executive experience.
Well, but I think being a governor and running a company are totally different.
As a dictator.
Yeah, because what you say goes when you're the CEO. I mean, for the most part, and when you're Trump, and then you're
especially. I have another side business I'm working on within the Yergz group is hospitality, and for a while, a consultant that your audience might know and remember was the host. A consultant that was working with me was the host of the TV show Hotel Impossible. A guy named Anthony Melchiori. He worked for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is one of the two people in the world who called him Tony.
Mm-hmm.
He goes by Anthony. The other one was his CO in the Air Force, who was a general. Anthony cried. He and another coworker cried on election night in 2016 because they knew what the country was in for.
Yeah.
I was the site agent. As you know, I spent 21 years in the Secret Service.
Yeah, which I should have mentioned at the top of the show. Yergz was in the Secret Service before he did this.
Yeah. My qualifications, really. Degree in history and political science and 21 years in the Secret Service, something like 11 and a half in Washington, D.C., where I saw this stuff very firsthand.
Right.
And I was the site agent for his last inaugural ball in 2016. Well, in 2017.
Yeah.
And as the head person for the Secret Service for that one location, I have a staff counterpart who is from, the overall committee of Republicans, and he's the one who overall planned the party at this location. We got to know each other, as we should, exchange phone numbers, so on and so forth. Couple months later, maybe even a year later, I'm not sure, something crazy, and you can pick one for purposes of the example because there are plenty.
Right.
Something crazy in the Trump administration happened. I run into him. His name is Luke. I run into Luke in a bar, and I ask him about it. I said, dude, what the hell? He says, "You think that's crazy?" This is an exact quote. "You think that's crazy? Wait till you see us in our second and third term."
Right. Yeah, I mean that's part of the problem is that they were talking about it openly.
That if that doesn't scare the shit out of you, you got a problem.
Yeah, but I think the problem is most people
Don't go
don't.
tell me what a patriot you are and how American you are if you think that's okay.
Yeah, but I think the problem is that most of the electorate right now is not paying attention. I think that you look at the whatever 160 million people that voted in 2020, and we'll see if 2016 was the biggest election, then 2020 was the biggest election as far as turnout goes. We'll see if 2024 is. I'm skeptical that it will be for president, but
Population's growing. What I need to see is not the number of people. This is the same thing I have in the movie industry. Oh, Titanic made X number of millions of dollars.
yeah.
Well, at $20
Yeah.
a ticket, what do you think they're going to make?
Right, of course. Yeah, the ticket prices keep going up. Yeah, it's like that's not a correct measurement.
Let's go back to my dad when he was my age and he was paying 25 cents.
Right. So I think the problem though is that when you get into this polling stuff is I think most people, because they've either I think most people have checked out. So there was a poll, and I don't have it up in front of me, so I don't have the exact numbers, but it was something like in 2005, or basically throughout most polling, if you ask people, do you watch the news and stuff like that, there was like 3% of the country that just said like, no, I don't really pay attention to politics at all. I don't like watch the news at all. Like basically it's a pretty small percentage. That ticked up starting after Donald Trump was elected to like 15%. So a pretty big jump, like almost a 5x jump in people that kind of just said, God, this is getting worse and worse. And I think a lot of people just check out sometimes for their own mental health because it's hard to figure out what's true and what's not because so much of the left and right media has really just gone all in on their side and they won't ever,
Let me stop
Yeah.
here for a second.
Yeah.
You just said about essentially about not being able to trust the media.
Right.
Now you want to listen to their polls?
Well, but it's not there. I mean, I think there's a difference between the polls, which are generally done by professional outlets that do polling. And yeah, issue polling, I'm with you on. I don't think issue polling is very accurate because so much can be twisted in the way that people phrase those questions, and they can be confusing. And I think that's the biggest problem with issue polling. But with candidate polling, where it's like, if the election, because the question always goes, if the election was held today, who'd you vote for? And most of these polls are doing one of two things. They're either going only giving the choices of Biden and Trump, or they're doing the full 5-way race with RFK Jr. and Jill Stein, I guess, and what's his name? So to me, that's only interesting when you get down to the battleground states. Because honestly, if you just do a national poll of, who would you vote for, it doesn't really, they can try to do a good job, but yeah.
Well, I gave on our show
Mm-hmm.
when I said about the media or whoever going to wherever to get polls. If you take, 1,000 registered voters in Florida, what do you think they're going to say?
Well, I mean, yeah. And really,
So
the polls,
there's Democrats there.
Yeah.
And so they'll put, that number of Democrats in, but, they're still going to get a Donald Trump response.
but why would they not? My question on the polling though, then is why would they, what would be your explanation for the shift? Because I can see why the underestimation happened in 2016 and 2020. I think that there is maybe a hesitancy for some Trump supporters to,
we also know now
polling.
that maybe not at the degree we originally thought, but we also know now Russian intelligence had a huge effect on 2016.
I don't know if a huge effect.
Yeah. Let me not say huge, an unknown effect on 2016. And the reason I say that is because they've admitted to influencing via social media.
Yeah, but did you ever look at those actual posts? I mean, they were clearly trying to rile up an already decided on an election. Like they were doing stuff about Black Lives Matter and like attacks on Hillary Clinton that you would have seen on Breitbart, for example. Like they were nothing out of the normal as far as I don't think they were persuading anyone in the middle. Because they seemed like they were just trying to gin up distrust and in the institutions and in the media, because really, I think the long game with Russia, and this is me theorizing, obviously I don't know what their exact goals were, but I think it was pretty obvious once they figured out they weren't going to be able to change votes. Not that they didn't try. They got into election systems, but they couldn't actually figure out a way to change votes. Because here's an upside to our country's election system. It is based on thousands of counties in 50 states that all have different rules and methods and machines and stuff. And it's very, very hard to swing an election via any sort of hacking and stuff like that, because you'd have to hack a specific county that you think is going to swing the election. And that's just not, even though it was very few votes in a few counties in 2020 and 2016 that basically ended up deciding it. You really have like Michigan and Wisconsin deciding it in 2016, and then really Pennsylvania and Georgia is what it comes down to, and Arizona in 2020. But even within just those states, you'd have to drill down to specific counties, and no one can predict what's going to happen even a couple weeks out, because if they could, you would have seen Hillary Clinton go to Wisconsin and actually campaign or whatever. And so it's interesting, because I think that what that polling does, though, I mean, is, to me, yeah, Russia was trying to influence it, but I think what they decided was like, okay, well, we can't actually change votes, but what we can do is sow distrust in the system, which I think they absolutely succeeded at when you look at the right.
That was already there.
Yeah, but I think it added to it. I think it
was already there. Yeah.
I think 2016 added, when you come up with the Russiagate stuff that happens after Donald Trump's elected, which I think was mostly the media blowing out of proportion what had happened and making a bunch of claims that didn't end up being true.
Listen to that podcast.
Which one?
Because it was a bigger, the whistleblowers.
Right. No. I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't meddling and influence and stuff, but like when the media comes on, when NPR and MSNBC have Adam Schiff on over and over and over again, who claims that he knows that there's smoking gun evidence that Donald Trump colluded with them, and he was lying. I mean, like he was lying, and it sowed more distrust.
Serious. I think it's more that a little bit more that he would have been somewhat misled.
But who was he misled by?
Well, some of the intelligence people that really thought it was perhaps a bit more serious than what it was. But the biggest thing about it that it was telling, and this is what's not out, is that when they went to brief both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton was all ears.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
Donald Trump didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
In fact, he told them that's not true.
Which part? Like the
Russia, they were being briefed by the intelligence community, the DCI, the current sitting attorney general, everybody, the big chiefs in the intelligence community. And Donald Trump, not only, who at this time, 2016, not only wasn't in politics, wasn't the president yet, he wasn't in politics, nothing. Hillary Clinton is at least an experienced senator and secretary of state and first lady.
Yeah.
He didn't want to hear it. And on top of not wanting to hear it, he told them they were wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, they kind of were.
How do you know?
Well, he was right, though.
But how do you know?
Well, I mean,
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. I agree, but I mean, the point is,
know that. Unless he had something to do with it.
But I think here's my theory of everything, though, is that sowed a lot of distrust in the media, because we were told over and over again that this happened. And what it ended up doing is giving Donald Trump a free pass on things that were accurate, because he got to call everything a witch hunt. And then we've done it again now with these indictments. And I've talked about that on the Friday show, is like, I think this New York trial is the weakest, and it's a sham, and it shouldn't happen. I think it was. I don't think it's a
sham. It's possibly. See, this is coming from a fraud investigator.
Yeah.
And I get this a lot. Fraud, it's such a victimless crime, blah, blah, blah. Well, why do you think you pay $29 for overdrafting your own account that you know you're going to have money in it, back in it again anyway. That doesn't go for them to hold on to the money to support whatever you shouldn't have bought. It goes to pay for the stuff they're not going to get back.
Yeah. But in this case,
so you're paying money you shouldn't have to pay, making you a victim. And in this case, with the everybody says, well, it's especially Kevin O'Leary. Well, if this is the case, then you have to go after every developer in New York City.
Which, I mean, I think is fair. No, but that is different. This is different because this is not. I'm not talking about the civil one. I'm talking about the criminal trial, trying to upgrade misdemeanors to felonies, and I think it's.
Yeah, but it's still relevant because of it may not have to do with his property valuations, which is what that one was, but it's still not a victimless crime in that when you lie about stuff like that, you're taking a value of one thing and making it a different value.
Well, but that's not what the criminal trial is. The criminal trial is trying to say that he committed a felony.
Yeah, well, the falsification of business records is still the same thing. And that's something that a fraud investigator understands that, the average guy or average, even advanced political junkie isn't going to see right away.
Right. But I guess my problem with it is that I'm not seeing any situations where New York's gone after anyone else for this kind of stuff. And I think that it gave Donald Trump, I think the other charges, I think the document stuff at Mar-a-Lago is slam dunk. It should disqualify him completely for being president again because he wasn't taking our national secrets seriously. In fact, a report just came out that he had, even after the initial raid, they had more stuff in his bedroom.
In the bedroom, that's right. Yeah.
And so now it's like, he was lying to his attorneys who were lying, so there's all this, I think that's a real case. The problem is this New York one, no one can explain it in a way that is slam dunk to the average American citizen. And so I think that they start tuning out all the other ones. I think it won him the nomination in the Republican. I think the Bragg going after him and trying to be the first to indict, I think was foolish. I think that it was careerist. I think that's basically what it boils down to is.
Well, that's what he ran on.
I know. And I think that's a problem. And then Joe Biden.
Let me push back on that for a second. And this is very recent. And it's another way how I'm gauging, I think November is going to be a big Democratic win. Fannie, what is her last
Willis.
name?
I think is it Fannie? I don't know. I can't remember. I don't know how she pronounces it. I think it's Fannie. I don't know.
She just ran for re-election.
Right. Well, in a primary.
Landslide.
But in a primary.
Yeah. But won that in a landslide.
Yeah.
That's telling.
But I mean, isn't that gross that's what people want is people that promise to go after specific political figures? I mean, I don't want our justice system to turn into that. That's gross to me.
But and that's not what I'm measuring. I'm measuring who's going to win in November.
Yeah, but that's a Democratic primary in a very Democratic city in Atlanta. I mean, it's really not. I don't know that that's a Behringer for the. That's not even a word.
But I think if that middle left would have said, yeah, this is a witch hunt. We've all many times agreed that's the deciding factor in so many cases.
Yeah, but I mean, we know who shows up in primaries. It's just the furthest left and furthest right. I mean, that's all that's showing up in primaries right now, especially for a DA thing. So I don't think that's and I do think there is evidence that, like, for example, let's actually talk about this because I think this is a good transition because you brought it up. So the polling I mentioned a moment ago was just Trump and Biden, just who's going to win the presidency. What's interesting about that is that there are some total flips. So like Arizona is becoming safer and safer for Donald Trump. But at the same time, Kari Lake is like way behind on the Democratic for the Senate. So
what's also happening in Arizona?
Well, the GOP is a mess there, but yeah.
But no, the Trump campaign just lost a huge lawsuit in Arizona about trying to redo something with the Republican rules.
Yeah, they're fighting between.
Essentially, the long and the short of it is Republicans are trying to make voting more difficult. They're gerrymandering.
Well,
And
Democrats are
that's getting
gerrymandering too. I mean, I don't like when people bring up that one side's everyone gerrymanders. It's across the board.
Yeah, but this is what's Republicans are doing it exponentially right
I know,
now.
but gerrymandering also doesn't affect Senate races.
Louisiana, that that there has to be the additional pro-black and therefore probably pro-democratic district in Louisiana that just got shot down.
Right.
In back to Arizona, um, they're trying to do something, and I caught it, and it was the first time I was hearing it. So this explanation, at least, they're trying to do something with it's with the actual date of election day.
Yeah.
As you probably know, mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, as when we were kids, they were known. Now they're just pretty much in so many states, almost anybody can use a mail-in ballot.
Yeah.
Mail-in ballots are not counted until election day.
Right.
And there's a very good reason for that. Because when those numbers start coming in, those are official numbers.
Right.
And they can be used to sway, election day in-person voters.
Right.
So they don't, if we don't even know what those numbers are,
they can't sway.
Nobody can use them to sway in either direction. But then the Republicans want counting to stop on election day, which favors the Republicans because many Democrats were using the mail-in ballot system.
Well, what do you mean by stop, though? You mean like they don't stop? But I mean, like, so they want to count them before?
No, they don't want them to be started to count on until election day, and then at 11:59 p.m.
Oh, well, but that's ridiculous. You can't. I mean, they're not going to win that.
Day one.
No. I think you are I think that's a misconception. No. But hold on. No. Hold on. There is a court case currently that is looking at when are they allowed to no longer accept them. That is happening for sure because they tried to I don't know if this makes this. I think this is going to be a Supreme Court thing that they're looking at. Was basically some ballots were coming in late, and some states tried to say, okay, we can still count those. And the court said, no, you cannot. They have to be, if you have a rule that says they have to show up by a certain date, they've got to show up by that date or you can't count them, kind of thing. I know there's that argument going on for sure. And I know some people are going to maybe try to, but that's not going to pass. Those laws are not going to pass. There's no way they're going to be able to stop counting if people follow the rules. But in what state?
The Arizona House Republicans have passed a bill that would significantly curb voting rights in the state and eliminate the most popular voting method, which is mail-in ballot. Another story here says security by mail-in voting. Arizona law has permitted voting by mail for more than 20 years, and approximately 80% of Arizona voters choose to vote by mail. Court finds that Arizona voter registration provisions. I got to actually click on that one because the title isn't. Court finds that Arizona voter registration provisions violate federal law. The U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona struck down an Arizona requirement that individuals seeking to register to vote must list their birthplace as a prerequisite. Oh, that's not the same one.
No, I mean, I know that people are trying to, which I also think it's incredibly stupid.
That one was about, having to list your birthplace. They were going to try to kick out essentially Mexicans, even if they were actual voters.
That would not pass, though. That would not hold up in courts. There's no way that they're going to say that an American citizen can't vote. I just don't think it's going to happen. I also think it's really foolish, by the way, I should say, for Republicans to try to limit mail-in voting because their biggest demographic, old people, love to use it. There's no actual data.
They need to. They need to. They can't get to the polls, many of them.
Right, and there's no data that shows that Democrats are benefited by my mail-in voting. They're only benefited by mail-in voting because they encourage people to mail-in vote, and Donald Trump told people not to do it. It's not actually a statistical thing. But I mean,
other than that, correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but like going back to kind of the polling and what the election's going to look like potentially, I think you're right in the sense that I think that there's going to be a lot of split ticket stuff. That's my prediction, is that what you're going to see is, I think when we go state by state, what you're going to see is perhaps a vote for Joe Biden at the top of the ticket and then vote for Republicans for Senate or their House seats, and vice versa. You're going to see maybe votes for Trump at the top of the ticket, but votes for Democrats. Or sometimes I think we'll see a lot of like left blank for president, but voted for the other stuff down ballot, proving that it's not that people are apathetic. It's just that they're like, I hate these two choices. I think that people are going to hedge, and you're seeing that in some of the polls. Because like I said, some of these Senate races are not even close. They're like the Democrat is blowing the Republican out of the water in Arizona, for example, but Donald Trump is blowing Joe Biden out of the water in the same state, which has to be that there's an overlap. Now, you could be right that one of those two polls are wrong, but it would be really weird for the presidential poll to be wrong and the Senate one to be right, especially when the Senate names are going to be less recognizable than Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And we are dealing with some weird stuff in 2024 in the sense that it's the first time since I think there's like 1950s that we've had the same two candidates 2 elections in a row, and it's certainly the first time we've had 2 incumbents, like 2 people that have been president before, other than whenever Grover Cleveland. Was that 1889? I think I can't remember, or 88.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is,
for the turn of the century after the Civil War,
it's hard to know. I think that it does lend to your case that the polling could be inaccurate because it's such a new scenario. Like, I think everyone that's trying to say, well, generally this happens, and generally polls mean this, or generally elections do this, or I think that we're really in for a year where those rules are not going to apply because we have such a weird situation in the sense that both these guys have been president. We already know them. I think what's going to happen, though, and this is just my reading of the tea leaves and the polls and articles and, all the sort of anecdotal stuff too. I think that people, for the most part, who are, let's call them those people that are kind of like a little checked out, like they're not us, they're not political junkies, they're certainly not super partisan, they probably care about certain issues. The 2 issues that people care the most about when you ask them in polls, like, hey, what do you care about? Are the economy, inflation, that kind of all the stuff that goes along with it, and the border has become a huge thing for them. And I think both those are bad for Biden, even though Trump, I don't think, was better on the economy necessarily. I think that people just remember their wallets being heavier before COVID, and Trump's going to get credit for that.
I think that's going to change too, because just yesterday, President Biden released more than 1 million barrels of crude into the system for purposes of bringing down the price of gasoline.
Yeah.
We all know what's coming this weekend, Memorial Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Every year at Memorial Day weekend in the beginning of the summer, the price of gas jumps.
Yep.
Why? Because they can.
Yeah. Supply and demand.
I was at a networking event here in the Tampa area when I talked with a guy who's in marketing who used to do that for the oil companies, not just like your local home heating oil delivery company, but for Shell and all these big companies. He said, do you know what it takes to bring down the cost of gas?
Well,
and
I mean,
he goes this.
Just open it up.
Turn on the spigot.
Yeah, I think, but I mean, it's a little more complicated than that. I don't think the president has the control that they claim they have over gas prices.
And I'm not talking about the president doing it. I'm talking about the oil companies doing it.
Right, but I mean, that's the problem, is that presidents have chained themselves to economic outcomes, whether good or bad, because they claim they can affect it good, but you then also have to take the bad. I think the problem, Biden actually has caused a lot of this inflation problem that people know, because it's like he keeps claiming he came into office with 9% inflation. It's an absolute lie. He's lying about that every time he says it. Inflation rose dramatically because he chose, and Congress, to spend more money that we didn't need to at the time to get out of COVID, and that caused inflation. And like, so he's gonna have to own this. It is an albatross across his neck.
Whether or not we needed to do it is not fact. The 9% might be fact, but whether or not we needed to do it, that's opinion.
It's a fact that it caused inflation.
Sure. But so did a $10 trillion tax deficit to the rich.
Right.
That he had nothing to
but that didn't actually cause inflation at all. That might have caused revenue to come in short, but it didn't.
It caused $10 trillion more in our deficit.
Yeah, but that didn't. But now Trump's COVID spending caused inflation. The problem is it lags, and it didn't hit until Joe Biden took office, and so.
Correct.
You know,
100%.
so Trump is to blame for inflation too. It's just that Biden added to what already, I mean, most people that I read are like, the economy, we would have had 4 or 5% inflation no matter what. Biden made it more like 9% because of what he spent. And I think Trump is going to get credit.
I think that's what he's really trying to say. We just agreed that it was at least 9% somehow, somewhere. And what Biden is trying to do is to say, this isn't my fault.
Right, but it's a lie.
It happened on my watch, but the cause isn't what happened on my watch. And that's why I want to go back to COVID itself. I have 6 friends that died from COVID. All but 2 are my age, early 50s, or younger.
That's statistically, yeah.
If COVID would have been handled differently from the very beginning, Donald Trump, this would have been a much different situation.
And I think that's what lost him the election in 2020, actually, was his handling of COVID, for sure. But I also think the problem is that is now not what people are thinking about. Now people, like, COVID is not at the top of the list of things that people are voting for in November of 2024. What they're going to remember is that I had more money in my wallet in 2020. That's it. I mean, I think that's really, and I see the chaos that happened. Now, this is unfair in my opinion, but the Trump and MAGA crowd is basically saying, like, I mean, other than COVID, which obviously he had no control of. I mean, I think no one would argue that the U.S. government, other than the fact that they were maybe paying for the research at the Chinese lab that this might have escaped from. I mean, that's a little tricky part. But, you know, it's not Donald Trump's fault that COVID happened. His reaction to it might not have been great, but and some of it was. Operation Warp Speed was a success, although it's funny that he can't brag about it because that'll get him booed by his fans. But, you know, that's something I wouldn't have thought was possible.
I'm sorry, who pushed to get the vaccine done?
Yeah.
Who was literally the first people to be vaccinated? Okay.
Yeah, and I think Operation Warp Speed was a triumph of government actually doing something right. Now, for the most part, it was them just getting out of the way of the things that they're normally in the way of. That's really what mostly they did. But I think the problem is people are going to just remember, like, well, we weren't in wars. We didn't have all these conflicts. It's not Biden. So COVID was no more Trump's fault than what's happened in Ukraine and Israel is Biden's fault, except that I think people are becoming aware of the fact that Joe Biden is so hesitant to escalate things, as he often says, that I think these evil world leaders in Iran and China and Russia know they can take advantage because Biden won't do anything about it. And I think that there was, I think, undeniably a wild card aspect to Trump that people truly did not know what he would do. And so I think there was maybe some sort of thing there. And I think people are just going to go, I don't want the chaos. But I mean, you look at that, you look at the Iran meddling I mean, not just meddling, I mean, like, straight up paying terrorist organizations to attack Israel. You see the Israel stuff. You see Biden's kind of handling of Ukraine and Israel, which I think has been poor. Even if you don't like the Ukraine support, you certainly don't like Biden. If you like the Ukraine support, you don't like Biden because he's been so hesitant to give them what they ask for that he's actually, I think Biden himself has caused Ukraine losses that they didn't have to take. And so I think that you just look at it and people are going to go, it's what's happening every 4 years now is people go, all right, we tried this guy. That didn't work. Next. And this time, their next option just happens to be Donald Trump instead of someone else. That's why I think he's going to win. I want to pull up this map because I think it's kind of, it's fairly interesting.
I'm going to give you some of the other elements to my reasoning.
Yeah, that's fine. So this is the map of the swing states. So everything that's gray is up in the air, essentially. And so you've got 104 votes that are basically up for grabs. So here's what I think is going to happen, and then let's do
dark red is a shoe-in.
Yeah,
light red is a possibility.
Yeah, it's
dark
basically
blue you in. Light
Yeah.
blue's a possibility.
Exactly.
Okay.
So solid. So the dark blue is solid, and then likely, and then the light blue is leans. But for the most part, we're pretty confident that anything that's blue or red is going to stay.
What's only really discussed in 3 of those, heavily discussed
Yeah.
in 3 of those gray areas: Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So going back to
It's not the economy.
Yep.
It's not the border, even though Arizona does have a border with Mexico.
Yeah.
It's election fraud.
You think that's the number one issue, or you think that's
not as far as like polling and what people are thinking, but what is really happening in those states. There's cases. Pennsylvania's a little bit more cut and dry in his favor because of a loophole.
in Trump's favor?
In Trump's favor because of a loophole. Like I said, Arizona just got shut down. And I have up the tab on one of my tabs for YouTube where there's a guy named Brian Tyler Cohen, who, to be fair, is left.
Yeah.
But he brings up one of the things I like about him. I usually wind up cutting him off, but when he's playing, whoever his guest is, or when he's playing whatever footage that he's talking about, I usually get, because it's footage of Marjorie Taylor Greene making an ass out of herself.
Well, I mean, she does that very well.
Or whatever. But I found, I'm not sure which one it is because it's not in the title, but I'll send you a link once I find it. The one about the Arizona ruling that just came out last week.
Yeah.
Or this, no, yeah, I think it would have been last week. At any rate, the election fraud. And this is another reason why I really am leaning towards not just a Biden victory, but a Democratic victory. I saw a comedian, and I'll tell you why this is a good source in a second. A progressive comedian. So we already know who he's voting for.
Right.
But the analogy he gave, he said, Joe Biden isn't my 17th choice.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to 2016 when there started out with that many, nominees or excuse me, that many primary candidates.
Right.
He's not my 17th choice. But I will strip naked and climb over broken glass to vote against Donald Trump.
Yeah, but I think that's the problem with. So I think you're right. The bases are going to come home no matter what. I think that, like, for the most part, if you are a far right person, far left person, even if you don't like, now I don't think there's as many on the far right that don't like Trump.
Yeah. I can never remember his name, but he's this kind of bald on top, ginger, redheaded guy with a little bit of a shitty beard. And he just has this whole, a lot of comedians now are doing crowd work.
Yeah.
They're like kind of welcoming hecklers. And I just saw this thing in Vancouver where there's this guy, this drunk and high, he had like a pound of cocaine in his coat.
Just what you want in the audience. Yeah.
So they're doing more crowd work and they're talking about, things of that nature. Point being, yes, this guy, whatever his name is far left.
Right, but don't you think that makes Biden trying to cater to the far left so much instead of going for the middle so foolish?
Biden needs to be in the middle. We talked about that, totally.
Sorry, that was my camera just freaked out for a second for some reason.
Yeah, I saw that. We talked about that. I agree. He needs to be doing better in the middle.
Yeah.
But what just the analogy that this guy gave, yeah, he's a comedian. Yeah, he's saying stupid shit like that to be funny.
Yeah.
But couldn't you just say, for purposes of democracy and defend the Constitution, I'll vote for Biden anyway?
I would, but then look at this.
About stripping naked and crawling over broken glass to just flat out keep democracy. And that's the point I'm making, is that, and have been making, is that Joe Biden's not my first choice either.
Right. But then look at this poll. So this is 2020. This is how many people, when polled, said they would never vote for Trump versus never vote for Biden. And obviously there were way more people that said they'd never vote for Trump than vote for Biden. This is the same poll in 2024 right now. There are more never Biden people than never Trump people. I think that I think Biden has a huge Jewish problem, which is going to be a problem for him in Pennsylvania. I think it's going to make Pennsylvania definitely in the loss column for Biden, because if you are Jewish, you feel abandoned by the president right now, because he's trying to waffle between these positions of I'm going to send stuff to Israel, but then I'm going to call him out, and I'm not going to call out the anti-Semitism that we're seeing on college campuses and all this kind of stuff. And he's playing. Yeah. So this is 2020. So it was 50% of the electorate or more. And these were in, I believe these were in swing states too. I don't think this was a national poll. I don't have
Here's what and I'm not studying this, but no. I am seeing NBC and Wall Street Journal, so that that's a slant.
Right, but I mean, this is New York Times Siena too. So New York Times Siena poll is not going to slant towards
that.
Yeah.
In the one where Trump is going to lose, but he's got more votes, essentially, he's over 50%.
Yeah.
In all of them, and Biden's way down.
Yeah. And these, by the way, this is just saying who would, more voters saying they would never vote. This isn't polling directly against each other.
No, but in 3 of those 4, Biden is over 50%. Not all 4 of them, and I know they're different time periods. So
yeah, because these are going from November of last year to May of this year. So this is over 6 months. But
Trump is still at 50%.
Oh, right. That's what's so crazy is that we've got 2 nominees that this many people say they wouldn't vote for either one of them ever. I mean, that's obviously a problem.
And what that tells me is that Biden can still pull that out.
And maybe, but I think that he's got a problem with the Jewish vote for sure. And so if we go back to this map, here's what I would think would happen. You tell me what you think will happen. I think Trump wins Arizona, so I'm going to switch that to leans Republican. I think he wins Nevada too, because if you look back at those pollings, that's where we had, what did we have? Let's see. It was Arizona is at +5 and Nevada is +6.2. So I think Trump's got those 2. I think that those are clearly in his column. I'm going to say the same thing for North Carolina, because I think that that's pretty handily at this point. At +5, we're going to say he could win those 3. I think that despite his foolishness in going after the far left, I think Biden wins all 3 of these in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. I think he wins those. Okay. Which basically leaves Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nebraska's special district. Okay, so when we go back to the map, it looks like this now. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up a little bit to show that we've got 36 toss-up votes, 250 to 252. I think that we will see a flip potentially of the 2 states that we had last time. I think that Georgia went to Biden, which really won him the election, and Pennsylvania went to Trump. I think those are going to swap. That's just going to be my guess. So that's why I think that this goes Republican. Oh, and this one goes Democrat. And then what's crazy about this scenario is the toss-up is
backwards.
What?
I think you got that backwards.
No, I think this is what's going to happen. I think Trump will win Pennsylvania and Biden will win Georgia. Based on, like I said, based on the fact
I thought you said that in 2020 Trump won Georgia and
no, it was opposite. It was in 2020 Biden won Georgia and Trump won Pennsylvania. But I think, or wait, yeah, you're right. Hold on. Yeah, sorry, you're right. I think I had it. Anyway, the point is we get down to where that vote in Nebraska matters if that happens. And this, let's just say those switch and we go back to Georgia and we say Georgia wins. Cause really the polling says this is closer to what happens anyway, because he's further ahead in Georgia than he is in Pennsylvania right now. I just think that depending what happens on Israel, I think is what makes the biggest difference in Pennsylvania. But either way, we end up to a toss up in that Nebraska district that will either, if it goes to Democrats, win it for Joe Biden, or if it goes to Trump, which it went to Biden last time, and Nebraska's trying to pass a law right now in their legislature that would make that go to the statewide winner instead of going. So if they win in that thing, it goes to Trump, we have a tie. So I don't think that's a totally unrealistic situation, but I think that
It's not, but I think you're leaving out the same thing that the polls leave out and the media leaves out.
which is
Rusty Bowers.
who is.
I knew it.
Yep.
And people like him. Rusty Bowers is the head Republican of the state of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
He is the speaker of, he was at the time in 2020, he was the speaker of the House, of the state House.
Yeah.
Was the lead Republican. He's the guy that Rudy Giuliani met with. He's the guy that Rudy told, "Oh, we've got evidence, and we want to come and meet with you and show you why there's election fraud in your state."
Yeah,
and he says, "Great, you got evidence. I'll see you tomorrow." They meet. They don't bring any evidence to the meeting, and he just sits back and look at his colleague, and they just kind of roll their eyes, and they see where this is going. And there's a staunch Republican, heavy Christian, somewhat far-right conservative calling bullshit. And that's what happened in Georgia. The indicators I'm using about Arizona, I think it's going to come down to Arizona.
okay.
I think, and the other one I think that I would change, I think Georgia is also going to go to Biden. One, as we talked about, the Fannie Willis strength in her victory.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't buy that yeah, but I mean,
I know that's just the Democratic primary
in Atlanta,
but who is also, yeah, correct, right, in a very Democratic area. Correct.
but I mean, he's winning Georgia by four points right now in the average, so it's not.
Yeah, but there's also some other recent news that wouldn't have affected that. Who is also the big talking head for the state of Georgia?
Well, it depends who you're talking about. I mean, the governor, Raffensperger, or no, or you're talking about Stacey Abrams.
Raffensperger is another Rusty Bowers. He is another staunch conservative.
Yeah, but he's endorsing Trump now.
Yeah, because he has to.
I know, but I mean, I
think that's ridiculous. But
I do too.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh yeah,
Marjorie Taylor Greene is the poster girl for she gets pictures with guns and she does CrossFit and she looks like a man.
Yeah, but I don't think she's as popular as she was. I think that she's getting on the outs with her party.
Exactly. Oh, she's out.
I wouldn't say out, but
no, but in as far as effectiveness, she's out.
Yeah, because her failed bid to get rid of Johnson.
I don't think she's necessarily going to be unseated.
No,
but I think popularity and as such the influence. Trump doesn't want her. He said it.
Yeah. No, I think she's caused more problems for herself but which is fine because I'm not going to be sad about any of her misfortune. But I mean, you could be right. I just think Arizona.
The other one I think that's right is Pennsylvania. And look at because their election where they had Dr. Oz, who was a Trump puppet.
Well, he was just a terrible candidate, yeah.
Versus the former
Fetterman.
lieutenant governor.
No, it was versus Fetterman.
Yeah,
he wasn't the lieutenant governor, was he? He was the mayor of like a town.
He was a lieutenant governor under the Jewish guy that's still governor.
Was he?
I'm pretty sure that's.
I don't think he was. Yeah. I think he was just the mayor of I think it's like. I'm pretty sure he wasn't that high in government.
John Fetterman, U.S. Senator.
So you think Pennsylvania goes to? You think it goes to Biden?
If it does, it's still going to be close, but I think it might go to Biden.
I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, so I think we should both make maps and see how correct. So we're 6 months out. All sorts of things can change, obviously. I think that the biggest thing that can change from right now, obviously, we can't predict world events. I can't predict what's going to happen in Israel. I can't predict what's going to happen in Russia, Ukraine. I think all that stuff will absolutely matter, though. I think if we still have Israel-Gaza problems, I think if we still have Russia-Ukraine, which I think by all things point to the latter for certain, keep continuing on through the election. I just think Biden's going to have a lot of stuff that he has to own. And I think it's going to leave a distaste in people's mouth. And they're going to go, man, I just remember 2018 wasn't that bad with Trump. And I think that there's also, now, the thing that can change there is Donald Trump's in the lead in the polls. If the election was today, he would win it. But I think Donald Trump can screw that up because he's very good at screwing that up.
Yeah. So John Fetterman, in 2005, while John was teaching GED classes, he was encouraged by his students to run for mayor of Braddock.
Yeah.
In his 13 years as mayor, John worked to rebuild his community, creating jobs, stopping gun violence, getting youth engaged, blah, blah, blah. In 2018, John was elected to Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor and transformed the position to a bully pulpit, advocating for marijuana legalization, economic justice, equal protection for LGBTQ, and criminal justice reform.
But it's interesting you bring him up because Biden's getting hammered in the polls in Pennsylvania, but Fetterman's doing great. And do you know what the difference between those two is? John Fetterman has been an unapologetic backer of Israel and calling out the crazy pro-Hamas stuff on his side of the aisle, and because there's a large Jewish population in Pennsylvania, I think that's going to matter. If Biden changes his tone, which I don't foresee him doing because I think he has the worst advisors. So that's another interesting thing you brought up. Trump has a good crew around him actually now for a campaign. I think Biden's got the worst people around him right now. I think that he's got a bunch of young online people that are more interested in their futures. And because he's old and he's not the future of the party, they're not going to like toe his line. They're going to they're the ones like protesting their own administration. He should have fired all those people and been like, if you're going to write an anonymous letter saying you disagree with me, you don't work for me anymore. But he's feckless. He has no backbone whatsoever. And if he just had a backbone and came out and said, you know what, if you're pro-Hamas, if you're pro-terrorist, I am not with you. We can talk about the way this war is going, but he's trying to have it both ways. And I think it's going to lose him the election.
What his issue with the Jewish community and Hamas and Israel isn't so much that he's not for Hamas.
Yeah, but to not come out and be anti the pro-Hamas people is kind of like being pro-Hamas.
Well, his problem is Israel is just as bad as Hamas.
No, come on, you cannot say that, Yergz.
They just put an arrest warrant out for Netanyahu.
That Biden called BS. That is absolute BS. That's the freaking UN who is absolutely racist and anti-Semitic against it, and it's bogus charges.
I never really got to finish that explanation, by the way.
Yeah.
What did I tell you last week about the Israeli government as a whole?
I don't remember because it's been a week.
It's going far right. Like Erdogan or whatever his name is from Turkey.
Okay, you say that, but the other person they indicted in that arrest thing that the ICC is doing is the left opposition person to Netanyahu. It's bogus. It's not about right versus left. It's not about Netanyahu. This is call it Semitic, anti-Zionist, whatever you want to call it. It is anti-Israel explicitly. To try to lump them in with the Hamas terrorist that raped and murdered and beheaded children and videoed it to send to their relatives and stuff, to equate those two is unfair. It's very unfair.
But what's Israel doing?
Israel is trying to take out Hamas, and they're dropping leaflets and making phone calls to try to get civilians out of the way.
What also just happened in Rafah or whatever
Rafah.
it is? Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to take out Hamas. War sucks.
The Israeli army is not behaving themselves either.
I'm sure there are examples sometimes of that happening, but overall, there's no evidence that says that there are war crimes happening here. There are no war. There might be mistakes. There might be things that are wrong.
You think the Israeli Defense Forces just took the cameras from the Associated Press?
No, they took it from Al Jazeera, not the Associated Press. They kicked out Al Jazeera.
They took it from the Associated Press.
Okay, well, I haven't seen that part, and that's fine, but that's also not a war crime. It's not.
Because they're broadcasting the war crime.
No, I'm not saying Israel's not making mistakes. I'm not saying things aren't happening that are wrong. I'm saying that to accuse them of being the same as Hamas is ridiculous.
I'm saying they're going in that direction.
They're not going in that direction. They're trying to take out Hamas because they can't exist if Hamas is still there.
They're going in the direction of Turkey. They're going in the direction of Russia. Netanyahu has been there for how long?
This is not me defending Netanyahu. This is not about
Netanyahu has
politics.
been prime minister in and out for as long as Joe Biden has been in politics.
Yeah, for decades. But that's beside the point. My point is that
no, it's not. That's the point. When you have a democracy, term limits is a very important part.
But they can choose how to do what. No, they have a different form of government than we do, and we don't have term limits on a lot of things. We don't have term limits on anything other than the presidency. That's it.
But what's coming up? There's people talking about term limits for the Supreme Court.
Right. We can talk about all sorts of things that are wrong that we would change if we could about the Israeli government. To equate them with Hamas is not okay, though, Yergz. It's not the same thing.
I'm not equating them with
You're saying
Hamas.
They're sewing in the same direction. They're not beheading children. They're not raping women. They're not doing any of the things that Hamas does.
And you actually just said it, because you said about how the left is doing this, that, and the other thing, or we're talking about term limits. That's kind of a leftist thing. Do you think Trump is talking about term limits right now?
Well, no, I don't feel like term limits are necessarily a left thing. I feel like I see plenty of people on both sides suggest them.
When I say that, it's because Trump, when I say talking about term limits as a left thing, leaving it at X number of years or terms or whatever, and then you're out.
Yeah.
Is something that the left is talking about.
Well, I know, but that goes against what you said earlier.
President, exactly. Trump is talking about term limits and the fact that he wants more of them.
Well, I know, but that goes against what you said earlier. Does he not want to be president, or does he want to be president for forever? You can't be both.
He wants to be a dictator. And that was the other thing I wanted to bring up. With and can kind of, circle back to the polls themselves. You say about, or we say, I mean, it's obvious, the way they word the polls. If the election were to happen today.
Yeah.
Well, the election ain't today.
Well, I know, but that's just how they have to do it, because they can't hedge for all the things that could happen between now and then.
Because they bring in the emotion. Why do you think only half of our people actually vote? Because those are the people actually doing the homework.
Well, I mean, we'll put that loosely.
I mean, there's that middle section, and that's why I still love Up the Middle.
Yeah,
that is my podcast. I think that's the show. I think that is who we are collectively. You to the left-leaning right, Matt to the right-leaning left, me to all parties included. That's who's really going to make these decisions, and who has been. That is the deep state.
Yeah, I think the problem, though, is that most of the people that have left a party to become an independent still tend to just vote. They tend to come home. Now, like I said, that's happened in every other election. We'll yet to see if that happens in this one.
I've voted for Clinton in way the hell back, the male Clinton.
Yeah.
I voted for Bush twice. I was in D.C. when Hillary ran because I was with her, and I was supporting her, but then voted for Obama twice. Voted for Hillary. That was Hillary's 2016 was the first time I lost an election.
Right, but don't you think there's a degree of that happens? I think there are people like that for sure, but don't you think some of that is more of a vote against what happened prior and a vote for change? Like, that's what I feel like.
Voting against Hillary?
Well,
I think
any of them.
I think there's no. I was not a fan of Bush.
Well, I guess that Bush would. Yeah,
it's the same thing that we're seeing now. I wasn't voting for Bush. I was voting against Al Gore and against John Kerry.
Right, but that's the problem. I think you're right. That's how most people are voting now.
Favorite agents in 2004, but I stood there, just off stage left every time he said, John Edwards and I, we got a plan, and we're going to change things.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shake hands now. They never said what the plan was.
Well, I mean, and that's what Biden's doing now, too. He's just claiming he's going to do all this stuff, but that he needs Congress to be able to do. You're right. It's like he can't do most of the things he's claiming he's going to do. But I think the problem is people are going to look at what Biden has done, and they don't like it. And he's broadly unpopular.
He has done. I a friend of mine passed the Walmart here in rural Tampa, suburban Tampa. And I said, that area there along the highway wasn't as developed when I first moved here. And he said, and he was a DeSantis fan, he was a Trump fan, and he goes, "Yeah, that really looks really good now, doesn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it does." And I stopped short of the intersection. I said, "Read that sign. All part of Joe Biden's infrastructure program."
Yeah, but I mean, I
didn't know what to say.
I know, but I don't think people are. That's not at the infrastructure is not even in the top 20 things that people care about. Now they should care more about it, and I think the government is supposed to do more boring stuff like infrastructure. I wish they would instead of the hot button stuff. But the hot button stuff, I think Biden's a loser on almost every one of those issues, and I think it's going to haunt him come November.
I think he knows that. Obviously, I mean, the guy's been in politics for 1 year shy of the number of years I've been alive.
Right. But I don't think that means he's good at it.
He maybe is, maybe isn't good. I'll tell you what he is. Experienced.
Yeah, but I think he's got bad people around him, and I think he is digging his heels into his worst instincts, which is to try to be everything to everyone, which doesn't work. People can see him bash Israel, and then the next moment, because like the Israel thing's a great example of the thing he's trying. What?
I just think he's smarter than that.
I don't think so. I think I really don't, because if he was, I think he would tack a position. He'd look at Fetterman's polling in Pennsylvania, a state he really needs to win, and he would say, "I'm going to call out people that are pro-terrorist on my side." End of story. Just like people expected Donald Trump to do when we had like that Charleston racist rally. They expect you to call out the racism on your side. He won't do it. And then he tries to appease that side by saying Israel's the bad guys. But then he gives them the weapons. Then he says, "Well, I'm not going to give them those weapons if they do this." And then he gives them to him anyway. So people can see all of this. And I think that in policy, he's actually done the right thing with Israel, but in rhetoric, he hasn't. And I think he's going to lose both sides of the people. So if you're pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestinian or however you want to split it, Hamas, whatever you want to call it, I think he's pissing off both those crowds. And he's doing the same thing with like student loans, for example. He's going to he wants to bail out the people that are, causing these problems on college campuses. I think it's a bad look for him. And I don't think it's actually smart. I think if he was smart, now I think that the debates, which we didn't really get to, which we should probably do need to wrap up in a second, because I know you've got somewhere to be, right?
I have a call in 2 minutes.
Okay.
That I'm working on.
So that's why I do think the debates are a smart move for Biden, because I think that he has to do them. I think that he has to be able to get in front of people and he's got to make people hear Trump be crazy. Don't you think? I mean, that's the best strategy for him.
Well, you said it earlier, and I think that's one of the things we'll both forever agree on. Trump does that to himself.
Right. And so you got to put him on a debate stage without an audience.
Yep. This goes back to my allegations of the steered or guided influence of the media. Will the media actually show it?
Well, during a debate, they'd have to. Now, I mean, Fox News isn't going to show it if it looks bad for Biden. But I mean, I think most of the people are paying attention to that big news. Like, they will pay attention to the debate. I think that that's where Trump could potentially lose some support, because I think most people haven't paid attention to the crazy authoritarian kind of things that he's saying. And I think that that's going to change as people start paying attention. But we're 6 months out. People aren't paying that much attention. I think that's where you have the best argument for the polls not being accurate. I don't think that they're inaccurate. I think that they can just change.
You made a fair point. You made a fair point that they were accurate 6 months out in other elections. And I understand that. I agree with that. I just don't think that. I think the biggest detriment that how should I say? I think that the biggest issue to that is that they're starting to realize we're becoming relevant. Independent journalism is becoming a huge thing.
Yeah.
In fact, it's where most people are actually getting their news is from the internet, which is also a bad thing, because who's really fact checking us?
Oh yeah, and it's even, you think that each other. Yeah, if you think Fox and MSNBC are partisan, the Twitter is worse.
Yes.
Yeah, and exactly. YouTube and all the like.
what's bad about that is that people don't know that, so they trust it more.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we'll see. So I mean, we'll mark it down. Maybe we both make maps and we'll save them for later and see if we're right 6 months out.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you go, Yergz. Thanks for coming on. Again, you can check out Yergz. It's just yergz.com, right?
Yeah, yergz.com and yergzradio.com. That's where you can get our show on Friday, 12 noon Eastern.
Yep.
Where you see our homeless conservative, join our liberal crypto investor.
Yeah.
And,
running for Congress.
Meeting the referee.
It's fun. Yep. So check it out on Fridays. And thanks for coming on, and I'll catch you next time on Friday.
As one of my favorite Republicans once said, I'll be back.
That's too good. All right, thanks a lot, Yergz.
All right, buddy. See you again.
See ya. Thanks for joining me again today on today's episode of The Homeless Conservative. Your time, I know, is really valuable, so I really am grateful that you chose to spend some of it here with me. If you like what you heard, consider rating the podcast or sharing it with a friend. It really does help me a lot when you do that. This is a word of mouth kind of thing, and the conversation does not have to be one-sided. I love hearing from you, so feel free to reach out on Instagram or YouTube at The Homeless Conservative, or send me an email at blake@thehomelessconservative.com, because your input means a lot, and I'd love to know what you'd like to hear more of. So thanks again to Yergz for coming on, and we'll catch you next time.